Good morning. Hello. I just want to make sure the microphone is working. Maybe I should try that. This one has to be change. Thank you, Jen. Working. Yeah, I hope so. Thank you. He'll be here very soon. Let me see. It's a beautiful day in New York City. You can enjoy the window view until he comes. Okay. Something this camera looks like a not straight. Let me change. Good morning. Let me see. Sorry, this is gonna be a little move. Should be like that. Clear in California. Hi. Early morning for you. Okay, like that. It'd be very nice to see all of you, all over the world, all over the United States, all over the world. Okay. Let me check. I know camera is unclear. Okay, I have to clean. So a little bit. You see my fingers. Sorry. It's better actually. Yeah, it's a little better, but it's always some filter, looks like. Anyway, put a little bit this way. Let me move. Actually, music stand shoot. Closer to him. Happy Chinese New Year, Andy. Hi. Great. Happy Chinese New Year, right? Yeah. Hi, everybody to the Happy Chinese New Year. I'd love to have a many New Year. Okay. I'm gonna go take a look. Make sure he's okay. Hi. Coffee's ready.
some point it's really going to be that way, maybe.
Teeth
I hope
cover.
not.
Oh, what is it?
What's that?
Teeth cover.
That must be mouthpiece. Is that BD4?
Yeah.
Hmm?
Oh no, this is BD5.
BD5? I see. Okay. Wow.
Beautiful day.
Yeah, it's so gorgeous out.
Yeah.
It's supposed to snow today.
Every day they say.
Yeah, I know. At one point, it's supposed to snow all week, and then everything dissipated. Okay. This I don't think we actually need today.
Okay, that's fine.
So I'll put this away so it doesn't disturb. Ah. Then I have to have this a little bit.
So bright.
One time, every time you make coffee, it tastes better.
Good morning, is there
Yes.
everybody here now?
Okay.
I see everybody's name in here.
Oh.
Can you talk, please?
Okay, I will talk. Hello, everyone. Is this actually working?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, oh yeah. So the microphone is picking up?
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Okay.
But the speaker.
Oh.
Okay, good.
Okay. Let me get myself a tiny bit
Lisa,
organized
hi.
here.
Mori-san, hi. Shogo-san, Shogo, hi.
So everyone,
Hi.
hello. Here we are again. And in just about 1 month, it will be a year since we moved online. It's crazy, terrible. Oh, do you want to see me better? Maybe it's not a good idea. I should be like that judge who was turned into a cat. I think that or lawyer was the lawyer who was turned into a cat in a Zoom meeting.
I saw that.
Yeah, and he couldn't get out of it, so he had to do the entire deposition as a cat. I thought that's kind of cute, and that will actually tie in to a bit of what I will be talking about today.
Maybe we should.
No, do what? Think it's too bright out there?
You were so dark. Maybe?
Oh.
No, it's okay. This is fine.
Is it
It's
okay?
very nice.
I should ask people if it is okay, or we should do something about that. Okay. Well, I was planning on having quite a short little rant this morning, but I'm not sure exactly how that's going to turn out. Are we on? Yes? I'm getting mixed signals. Everything okay? So everyone, hopefully you can actually hear me. Good. Greetings. As I mentioned, in just about 1 month it will be 1 year since basically the world turned online, very much, or much of the world did, and little over 1 month it will be a year since we began these live streams. That's unbelievable. Hard to believe that I actually have that much to talk about. Probably you would think I'm just repeating myself over and over again, and I think I will repeat myself later today also, later this morning. Anyway, to go to our prelude to today, which is my rant about politics, etc., etc. We look at this past week, and in a certain way, too much is happening. So I have to really concentrate anyway this week on the matter which is of most personal concern, which has to do with the second impeachment trial of our former president. Of course, there are many other things happening. There's, for instance, this comedy surrounding the Tokyo Olympics that's playing out in Japan, which, for all of those of you who are following that, that's quite bizarre and disturbing in its own way. Good news in terms of pandemic, of course, is that there's a great of a ramping up of vaccine production, and in the United States, it seems like the progress of inoculations, of vaccinations, is actually beginning to progress in a more orderly and efficient way. So there's a prognosis that in a few months we'll have a large, I should say, fraction of the population, in fact, inoculated, and I hope that this actually will apply to the whole world. Of course, there still is a big gap between so-called rich countries and poor countries, and what we see is China and India and Russia trying to actually fill that gap by donating vaccines to various countries which are by any standards quite poor. Still, if the vaccine is not available worldwide in a very equitable and even way, there will be problems with actually trying to overcome the pandemic that we are faced with, that we are in the midst of now. So I do hope that a country like the United States, which is very much concerned with internal affairs, actually will begin to reach out into the world in an altruistic and not capitalistic way. Am I mumbling or am I okay? Okay, yeah, I have this terrible thought that no one can understand what I'm talking about, which may be the case in anyway. Okay, now we go now to the impeachment trial, and the prosecution rested its case yesterday. The prosecution, of course, comes from the House of Representatives, and which impeached, in other words, accused the former president of misdealings, of crimes against office and things like that, and is tried in the Senate. And the prosecution then comes from the House of Representatives. I think for those of you who are not in the United States, there's nothing you have to know about that at all. But there was terrible, I would say, news which came out of that, new news, and also which sort of parallel, was uncovered by the Justice Department, and this is not part of the actual prosecution case, but just yesterday morning, the Justice Department filed a memorandum which established that one woman, her name was Jessica Watkins, but a member of a right-wing group called Oath Keepers, I can't speak this morning. Wait. Maybe I'm a little better now. Okay. In any case, this was the Nope, I'm not. Paramilitary group. What language do I speak, actually? I don't even know it anymore. No way, I can't speak at all. Paramilitary group, Oath Keepers. And she, together with other members of her group, were organizing an assault on Washington, D.C. And what the Justice Department has filed was actually a memorandum which stated that she had delayed the planning of her, I should say, she planned it but delayed the assault until she was certain that our former president was actually behind it. And she texted this: "I am concerned this is an elaborate trap unless the POTUS is the president, himself activates us. It's not legit. The POTUS has the right to activate units. If Trump asks me to come, I will, otherwise I can't trust it." And of course, she came, the group came, other groups came, and this is more evidence of the direct involvement of the former president in the events of January 6th. Okay, and this was back in November 9th of 2020. This is very early that the planning and the connection with the Trump administration actually was taking place. Okay, I go over little things that struck me. Now, the senators had to take an oath to be impartial jurors and not to in any way become connected with the defense or the prosecution. So just like a jury, which is empaneled and then has to be in a certain way isolated from both parties in order to supposedly come to a fair decision, that's what the Senate is supposed to be. However, 3 senators who and they were very well known, and I will actually name them for people. They're famous: Lindsey Graham, Ted Cruz, and Mike Lee. They met with the Trump defense attorney, David Schoen, and this is a report of CNN, by the way. And one of the CNN reporters, John King, reported, he said, "You have Lindsey Graham and other Republicans." Is something happening? No? Okay. We should have some kind of barrier so I don't see everything that's going on in the back of the camera, so I get nervous. Okay, so Lindsey Graham and other Republicans actually seem to have been plotting strategy with Trump's lawyers. That's quite amazing. Now, considering the overwhelming evidence that points to wrongdoings in so many ways, it's a little sort of not really understandable, I should say, why you have the Republicans still largely standing as a bloc in the camp of Trump. This is, of course, very disturbing, but it's possible that financial concerns overwhelm everything else. And of course, in Trump's new PAC. This is PACs are the organizations, for those who are not familiar, which collect money to support candidates, etc., causes, etc., etc. And in his new PAC, to reward Republicans who are staying devoted to him, so he has over $30 million at the moment. I read these figures and my heart sinks all the time, because we have so many organizations, arts organizations, organizations for benevolent causes, which are hurting because they don't have a couple $1,000s, a couple tiny bit of money with which to continue operations. And here you have 30 million going to this, just in this alone. And of course 30 million for certain people and certain organizations is just a drop in the bucket. What more should I say about this? Of course, I talked earlier about kind of circular, what should I say, circular path that this kind of money takes, I should say. And because this money is used for, let's say, by influence, which then goes back to very often the original people who are spending that money. So it's kind of a cute system for those who are involved, not for those who are not. Okay, there's so much more to do. Let me see, but perhaps I move on. Because I did mention many things in the introduction that I wrote. One thing which is interesting, though, which I should mention about the pandemic is the reason why at least one of the new mutations of the coronavirus is called the British version of that, is not actually necessarily because it developed in Britain, although we don't really know that. It's just that British researchers had spotted it earlier than anyone else did. And that was thanks to a large government investment at the very beginning of the pandemic to analyze the genetic makeup of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And they have already sequenced 43% of the total coronavirus genomes worldwide. And what they did, they take from the cases in England, and of course sequence viruses which are found in these cases, and that is over 5% of the country's overall cases. That seems like a little amount, but it's actually quite a lot. Now, the United States, which actually, as it turns out, has at least a fourth of the pandemic's patients, which is not a great statistic, not anything to be proud about, has sequenced only about 96,000 viruses. That's a fraction of 1% of around 27, or actually I think now it's more than that. I don't have the case. I stopped looking in the morning for the latest numbers. It's just too much for me. But it's at least 27 million cases that we have now. So that means that in the United States, the sequencing rate places this country, the U.S., at the 34th in the world. And all this information I got from Smithsonian Magazine, by the way, as it researchers at the Broad Institute, which does tabulations of these things, mention that American scientists and public health authorities have been flying, if not blind, then at least with serious tunnel vision. So that's something which actually I hope is being rectified now. Okay, so I will move on. Well, I think that's good. Yes, I know. I'm being rushed, and that's true. And I want to talk about two women and one couple. And actually more than two women, but basically two women. And the first, of course, is Harriet Tubman, who I was supposed to talk about last week, but I really didn't have time to do her justice, so I decided to postpone to this week. And from my point of view, although it's apparently not everyone's point of view, it's actually wonderful that she's getting recognition in a way, and her portrait will be on the new $20 bills, I think, in the United States, instead of Andrew Jackson, who is, of course, a rabid racist. Some people say that this is not really what she would have wanted, or something. This is patronizing, etc., etc. But I think the removal of someone like Andrew Jackson from our currency is not a terrible idea. Before I do talk about her, I have to talk about one other thing still, because I don't want. Yes, I have this little contraption to keep my body up straight somewhere in the house. I never use it, but I just have to remember. Okay. Am I up straight? Good. Up. I know, I tell everybody that. Actually, that's why, one of the reasons I like to practice, because I go up. It's just last month, and this is something I just read about now, that I thought this is kind of also rather disturbing. This San Francisco Unified School District voted to rename the Abraham Lincoln High School because, as they said, that the former president's, Abraham Lincoln this is, policies towards African Americans and Native Americans was not very favorable. This always reminds me of Harold Bloom in a kind of backwards way, with the misreadings of history, misreadings of literature, misreadings of culture, misreadings of different cultural groups. That's now what I read was this. This is the San Francisco committee opted not to consult any historians by saying, what would be the point? History is written and documented pretty well, so we don't need to belabor history. In other words, we don't need to figure out things about this. Of course, if you went back in time and talked to any of the slaves who had been freed, you would get a different perspective. And I want to just mention one woman. Her name is Nance Leggins Costley. And this was in 1841. She was the first, I'd say, black person, or African American. She was born in the United States when it was the United States, who was freed by Abraham Lincoln. And I read a little bit about the article that I read about this. It said, if the world were just, the name Nance Leggins Costley would resonate amid the lights of Harriet Tubman, who I will talk about just next, Frederick Douglass, and other abolitionist rebels. But her story is hardly known. She was born in Illinois, and she lived in Pekin, Illinois. Pekin was a new town at that time, when early in the 19th century, and was named Pekin, which is the French for Peking or Beijing now, because supposedly it was at the end of the world. Now, her story is not as dramatic in a certain way as other people's, but I will kind of go through it in a very quick way, because it is anyway interesting, especially because it involved Abraham Lincoln before he was a national figure. So this is in Illinois, and Illinois, which was established after Britain ceded a large bit of land after the Revolution, and this Northwest Territory, which was established in 1787, actually forbade slavery. And when Illinois became a state in 1818, its constitution prohibited slavery. But slavery still existed in Illinois for various reasons, some of them quasi-legal and some of them not legal at all, of course. Now, in 1752, and then, in fact, Illinois was part of the territory owned at that time by France, or I should say, taken over by France. And slaves, black slaves, were held by 40% of the Illinois household. This is according to the Randolph Society. Now, despite that, the ordinance of the Northwest Ordinance, what am I talking about, and the prohibition of slavery in 1818, the slaves who had been slaves before that remained slaves. They were called French slaves, and in fact, by and large, they were not the original slaves, because but they were descendants of those slaves, who by all rights should not have been slaves. And they were born even after 1818. And also, slaves could be brought to work in Illinois, even though slavery was prohibited for periods of at least a year. And somehow to get around the prohibition of slavery, indentured servitude was allowed. Indentured servitude is a kind of contractual slavery where someone enters a contract that you will work for a person, perhaps with no pay, perhaps just with room and board, whatever, for a period of time. And that period of time could extend to 99 years, of course, which is longer than generally the person who would enter into that contract could live, and would apply to that person's descendants. So this was all very complicated, and in fact this prohibition of slavery was something that was on paper but was not particularly followed. So this Nance Leggins Costley was born into the family which was subjected to indentured servitude. And I won't go into all the details of this case, but even her original so-called owner, this was a person by the name of Cox, was bankrupted and had to sell his property off. So she was actually sold to someone. And as a girl of 7 years old, she protested. And she thought that she did not want to be simply sold to someone like that. Okay, and this continued. I'm not going to say, please, if you're interested, you can look up, I should write it down for people, her name. Should I do that? You can do? Yeah? And
Yeah, that's fine.
what's that? Nance Leggins Costley. Because it is a very interesting story. But in any case, on July 9th, 1841, Abraham Lincoln appeared before the state's High Court, and his arguments, with very legally leaning on the anti-slavery language, both of the Northwest Ordinance and the Illinois Constitution, petitioned the court to grant her freedom. And the justices of the court agreed with Lincoln. They said, it is a presumption of law in the state of Illinois that every person is free without regard to color. The sale of a free person is illegal. And this was the first achievement, perhaps, of Abraham Lincoln in his efforts to abolish slavery. I bring this up simply because when someone glibly mentions that, well, we don't have to consult history, we don't have to do this, we don't, because everything is very obvious, things are not obvious. And we have to be very careful that we don't get into a situation which, in fact, can remind us of, I should not even speak about it this way, but what comes to mind is like totalitarian blunders, the canceling of people, the canceling of races, the canceling of it. This is very, very dangerous. So, about Harriet Tubman. Now, here I will just go read a bit. About her, and so Harriet Tubman, she had a long life. She was born in 1822 and died at 1913. And she was born enslaved in Maryland, and she was very seriously, horrendously abused, whipped, etc., by her various, what we have to call masters as a child, and so much so that she developed a traumatic head injury when one overseer threw a heavy weight onto her head, actually, and of course she passed out, and that head injury actually, the results of that head injury sort of stayed with her for the rest of her life. So I will not go through in great detail, but in 1849 she escaped to Philadelphia, then came back to try to rescue her family, brought her family out, but her actually brothers decided for various reasons to go back. That's and then became someone very important in what was called the Underground Railroad, and she freed easily 300 slaves, sort of led them to freedom, I should say. And during the Civil War, she acted as a spy, a scout, and after that, after the war, she was very active in the women's suffrage movement. I will go now and just, it's very touching, although it's very, of course, in its own way, very dated. Here, I want to go back to the cover. Yeah. Here. Biography of her. And it's called Harriet, the Moses of her people, because she led her people to freedom. And this is this one. Okay. And this is, I showed this earlier, but this is her picture when 1895, when she was quite elderly, of course. This way. And I want to read, let me see, here. A letter which the Frederick Douglass, the great abolitionist, also an escaped slave for freedom, but one of the great orators in United States history, wrote to Harriet. And this is basically a review of this biography of hers, which was written actually to help her cover many of her debts that she had. Yeah. Sorry, this is just things that are happening backstage. So, dear Harriet, I am glad to know that the story of your eventful life has been written by a kind lady and that the same is soon to be published. You ask for what you do not need when you call upon me for a word of commendation. I need such words from you far more than you can need them from me, especially where your superior labors and devotion to the cause of the lately enslaved of our land are known as I know them. The difference between us is very marked. Most that I have done and suffered in the service of our cause has been in public, and I have received much encouragement at every step of the way. You, on the other hand, have labored in a private way. I have wrought in the day, you in the night. I have had the applause of the crowd and the satisfaction that comes from being approved by the multitude, while the most that you have done has been witnessed by a few trembling, scarred, and footsore bondmen and women whom you have led out of the house of bondage, and whose heartfelt "God bless you" has been your only reward. The midnight sky and the silent stars have been the witnesses of your devotion to freedom and of your heroism. Excepting John Brown of sacred memory, I know no one who has willingly encountered more perils and hardships to serve our enslaved people than you have. Much that you have done would seem improbable to those who do not know you as I know you. It is to me a great pleasure and a great privilege to bear testimony for your character and your works. It's such a wonderful letter, and it is so eloquently written. Okay, I move on to another woman. Don't worry, don't worry. Everything will work out. I'm being prompted to move more quickly. Okay. And this woman is Dr. Gladys West, who is very much alive today. But Dr. Gladys West invented the GPS, or Global Positioning System. And this is something that has incredible importance for us today. And finally, on December 6th, she was inducted into the Air Force Space and Missile Pioneers Hall of Fame by the United States Air Force. And I just want to show you a picture of her. Dr. Gladys. Here. It's very unassuming woman who just happened to be a genius. And I just want to quote one statement of hers, which I think is, in a way, very profound and very important for us in the arts. When she was asked about what she did, and was wondering why many people were unaware of her seminal role in the development of the GPS, she said, when you're working every day, you're not thinking, what impact is this going to have on our world? You're thinking, I've got to get this right. You just want to do something which is right and has value for yourself. That's wonderful. Anyway, so that is Gladys Wright. Then there's something which probably many of you already know about. And let me see, I should have this. I'm going to have to try to find a better picture. I'm thinking. Let's see if I have that. Yes. Okay. This is a couple. Get this off here. Which it's actually a German-Turkish couple. Özlem Türeci and Ugur Sahin. Of course, I'm pronouncing these names incorrectly. Who were working in Germany, and what they have done, actually, and they have a very small company, and what they did, yes, I know. I just have to make sure that I don't make a mistake with this. That's because I didn't write down. Yeah, they are largely responsible for the development of the vaccines that are being used today. Yeah, that's what I should. And this is the couple. There. Because they developed the techniques for synthesizing the new kind of vaccines that both Moderna and Pfizer, for instance, and the other companies have utilized for them. And again, they are a couple who have not been interested in great fame, just interested in the results of their research. So that's something. That's right. Okay, I should talk about more people, but I will do that next week. I know, yeah, it's not so terrible, the time, I must say. Okay. But I do speak about just two little things before I go on. And this first things have to do with the sea cucumber. And the reason I'm speaking about this, and what I will speak next, will become clear as I speak about this. So sea cucumbers, which have been the subject of a paean by the ancient Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu, basically because they're so delicious. Have actually turned out to be incredibly important for things like coral reefs, and basically for the health of the sea where they're living. That's right. And sea cucumbers are kind of like vacuum cleaners, as it turns out. So they ingest and then metabolize things, and then they defecate, and what they defecate actually is a very important, we could say, fertilizer for the ocean. Without sea cucumbers, and I also speak about them because they have been overfished and they are endangered actually now. that's they excrete a lot of poop. It's okay. We need to know about this though, because it's a lot, but because it is very, very important. You see, this cycle that we have of called the cycle of life, whatever, is fascinating this way. And we see that even though this lowly sea cucumber, which is basically, you can say, it's a kind of shell and a digestive tract, we can say, is of critical importance to our world. I think that's actually wonderful. Now, I finish this part of my rant with spinach. Because scientists have managed to engineer spinach plants to send email. And this is just great. This is amazing. And it seems like a joke, but in fact it's actually rather important. Because the Nature Journal, this is actually had an article about this. This is MIT engineers experimented with what is called plant nanobionics and discovered that the roots of the spinach plant, for instance, can detect the presence of compounds which are often found in explosives, like landmines, for instance. And the world is littered with landmines and cause tremendous numbers when we don't even read about them so much because it happens so often, of maiming and death, etc., etc. So this is something that's very useful, in fact, because otherwise you find with magnetic things, and of course the landmine can blow up in your face while you're doing that. Now, what they found out that the roots can detect the presence of these chemicals. They're called nitroaromatics in groundwater, and the carbon, these nanotubules in the roots, then emit a signal. This signal can be picked up by an infrared camera and sent as email. This is great. So as one chemist, actually, this is from MIT mentioned, it says, plants are very good analytical chemists. They have an extensive root network in the soil and are constantly sampling groundwater and have a way of self-power to transport that water up to the leaves. This is a novel demonstration of how we have overcome the plant-human communication barrier. That's really so interesting. And it says, initially the research was conducted to understand whether wild-type plants could be bioengineered to detect explosive materials. However, scientists now believe that the nanotech could be stretched further to engineer plants to warn researchers about pollution and other environmental issues. So, we find plants can team up with people to actually do something to help preserve our world. It's just wonderful. So what shall I do now? I will now go from here to our little world and speak of a little more about technique. And as plants have these nanotubules and how their roots can detect things and then transfer that information, we have also nerves, which actually can detect minute differences of feeling. And this feeling we can transfer and actually employ to create an artistic result. I've talked about this very often, that we play finally by feel. We play by ear, of course, we have to hear, and there's always feedback, and hearing is also a kind of feeling. It's a different kind of response of our nervous system, just like sight is also, but we feel, and that is connected to our hearing. And often our feeling will come before our hearing. And we can know that in a certain way. This is something that I think in elementary school I remember doing, that when they say that we have nerves which actually bypass for emergency the brain, or you have a feedback mechanism which doesn't not actually need to be controlled by our brain, so that if we touch something that is too hot, for instance, before we know about it, we actually draw our finger back. Then we feel the heat, and finally we understand that maybe we burned ourselves. But that initial reaction is anyway a reaction of feeling. So, what do I want to talk about in terms of music with that? Okay, I should take a clarinet, I guess. Put this back here. Have some more of my coffee so I don't babble on completely incomprehensibly. And I think I will use this and I think we're all probably in the state where even our instruments are feeling the weight of the pandemic. So my clarinets, and I must say I have many too many. Although I also have to say that probably all of them together are considerably less money than one violin. Well, anyway,
of course.
But the joints of my clarinets have become so incredibly tight, despite everything I've been doing, trying to take care of them. Okay, let me put this over here maybe, and I talk about these things. So, what do I mean when I talk about feeling? For that, I think I have different reeds here. This is kind of interesting. Okay, so you're wondering, what is this going to be about? So we feel in so many different ways. And one thing I will talk about first is the feeling of the embouchure. And this is something that I actually feel, I guess, in all my years of teaching, that it's most difficult for wind players is to actually, I would say, systematize the feeling which they have in their mouth. And I've talked about the registers and the positioning here this way, but all the exercises that I have given about that really have one goal: to increase the feeling that we're in the embouchure. This way. Always this is happening outside just at this time. Bizarre. I don't know what it is. Perhaps it's not. I wonder if people actually hear it. Sounds like indigestion out in the courtyard. So feeling again. So this is what we need for the registers, is not to mechanically feel, I shouldn't even use the word feel, to mechanically move. Let's say, okay, I come to this note, I better move it. I come to this note, I better move. You feel it this way. And I think that the, how should I say, this is something I've talked about for years and years, how the idea that people have had that you should not change the embouchure at all is actually a misunderstanding. And I realized that for myself, because at first, just like I was told, I thought that, no, I don't change my embouchure at all. But in fact, I found out that I do. But what does not change is the feeling of resistance in the instrument. So it's the feeling which should not change in a certain sense. But in order for the feeling not to change, the actual positioning has to move, but has to move in a very systematic way. What's happening?
My hand.
Oh, your hand is involved. Let me see. Ooh. That's really funny. But did you feel that? No. Okay, anyway. So, if I'm playing, and if I actually don't move, that's up. Of course, you get the problem of the first break, the second break, etc., etc. Also, certain notes, for instance, like for instance that A flat or the D flat that below that, very often that note is stuffy in a way on the clarinet. And once I apologize to those of you who are watching who perhaps are not clarinet players, but this can be applied to every instrument in their own specific ways. But this is a clarinet. Yeah. So if I play, and there I feel this great resonance in my face here. I make the same resonance feeling for that D flat. And going on, that B flat, which also gives very stuffy, and people use all sorts of fingerings to resonating fingerings, I should say, to get rid of that stuffiness. And I think there's use for them. I don't disavow their use at all. But the fact is that you can actually channel the embouchure in a way to create resonance in these stuffy notes in a case, so that the feeling of resonance actually continues through these stuffy notes. And then when we change the register, that carries through to the next register. Going up all the way to there and even higher. So they feel that the feeling of resistance in the instrument and the feeling of resonance when I play does not change. But in order for that not to change, okay, we have to develop a very sensitive sense of the relationship between the movement of the embouchure and the feeling. There's the feeling which actually controls the actual movement of the embouchure. And this is very much, as I've mentioned before, this is similar to if we just even walking, we feel the ground. If we don't feel the ground, it becomes much, much more difficult, of course. If you don't. I will now make a slight detour, which is related though, and which a lot has been said about multiphonics on the card and how to produce them. And I talked about the Bertolozzi book and the problems of the Bertolozzi book, and there are others also that the issue of multiphonics, of course, has to do with being able to have the instrument play different harmonics at the same time. Now, of course, when you're a beginner and you play and you go up like that, you're actually playing a multiphonic. You know, that's it's like a grunt or whatever you call it is just a multiphonic, which you don't want to do. Just like a squeak is a high note that you don't want to play. But you control these things, you actually have multiphonics. Now, let's say I will give a simple example and say the multiphonic sort of like this. Oh, those multiphonics. Now, I produce them here, and I think they all are produced in the front here, and it's a connection between the feeling of the lip here and the sound. So if I take this one, something like that multiphonic, I play the high note and the low note. And they are two different places on the reed, and I play in between. But what is most important is that I feel the sound vibrating here. Let's say I'm playing different multiphonics here. I feel a slight variation in where the sound is here. That way. And of course I can do many different ones, but I'm just using this as an example. Now not only that, I feel the pressure which is necessary to produce these harmonics. So if you have too much pressure, you get perhaps only the low note. You have too little pressure, maybe you get only the high note. So in between, and not only that pressure I feel the teeth under the lip, and I feel how much lip I actually have on the reed. So there can be more lip or less lip on that. So if I'm playing, for instance, that multiphonic, I feel that the lip is very narrow on the reed. If I play this one, the lip has more surface area on the reed. But I feel all of this happening. And this is, what should I say? These are examples of using sort of extended techniques, which of course apply to all elements of actually playing the instrument. So I feel here, no matter what, if I'm playing, I feel here. Here. That way. I feel it here. I feel how the resonance of the note is being transmitted from the instrument out. I feel here, and I probably feel it maybe even before I hear it. That I don't know. That's something which would be an interesting to make some kind of experimental research about. But in any case, so we have to, in order to feel here though, we need to experiment. And we can experiment also by playing different kinds of reeds. And this is all like people going, oh God, what's he talking about? But let's say I'm going to take another reed here. Okay, and of course I'm going to stick my foot in my mouth completely with this. And it's going to go. Let's see, I want to see if I have a reed which is way soft. This is 25. Well, let's say I take this reed here, which is very, let's see if this will actually work at all with what I want to do. Now, it's too hard. Okay, I have to, that kind of reed doesn't work. Oh, see, I was not actually planning to do this, but I decided that this made sense. Maybe something like this is good. Yeah, it's a little better, but I want to do something else, sorry. I'm going to put this by Mozart. Yeah. I'm radical in this, and I don't expect everyone to really follow my example. But I have different mouthpieces also. Some are much closer, some are farther. But some take harder reeds, some take softer reeds, and this has been very useful before the pandemic when I was traveling a lot, because you go in different places, different things, and you have different situations. So sometimes it's much handier to change a mouthpiece than it is to change a reed for that. It depends on altitude, etc., etc. Good. This is exactly what I want, because this reed is way too soft. And what I want to somehow show is that even something like this, and this is totally with this kind of mouthpiece unacceptable. It's useful sometimes for practicing. And that's because we can learn anyway to control it. So it's like that if I play in a certain way normally. So instead, I have to so little by little, I'm figuring out how to shape the embouchure to actually play this totally unacceptable reed. Right. And this is very useful because we begin to understand that we can actually prevail over our reeds rather than searching for the, spending so much time searching for the one reed which is going to work. We can actually make the reed work. Of course there are limits, and there'll be one reed you throw it out, of course, like that. But the limits are not as limited as we think they are. That way. But this again, I feel here. I feel how that resonance works, and all of a sudden, that resonance, that way. So. This is an extreme example, but anyway, it's an important one. So I go back to my other way, because I don't say that there's no such thing as a better reed and a worse reed, of course. I'm going to go back to this. Okay, there are many more things to talk about, but I just want to speak now. Let me look what time it is. Okay, we have just about enough time for one thing. That's right. I want to speak about, just very briefly, about the fingers and how we need sensitivity in the fingers. So you have to feel where the fingers actually land on the instrument, this way. And that's why I believe that there's form and motion, but we should not think about a hand position. We should think about a hand feeling. And some people play like this, some people play like that, like this. And that depends totally on your basically physical makeup. Yeah. And the feeling of what actually gives you contact with the instrument. And this feeling we have is something that we actually even have extensions to our bodies. And there's a famous little experiment of the great philosopher and one of my very big influences, Ludwig Wittgenstein, who mentioned to say, if you take a pencil and you can close your eyes and go like this and say, where do you feel, in this case, the music stand? And you feel it at the tip of the pencil, even though the pencil is over here. We don't feel it here, we don't feel it here, we don't feel it here. We do feel it here, so it's there, you see. So even there we feel it, and we can feel if we have more pressure on it or less pressure, we feel it exactly. And this is, of course, why artists can use brushes in a very expressive way. As you can. And that's why older sort of graphics programs I remember on computers before, where you could actually draw, but you didn't have the tactile feeling of when you press one way you get one thing, one way another way, were very, very disconcerting. Because we already have kind of a repertoire of feeling in this. So that's the basically all I talk about with that. And I think, and because I've promised several people, and I don't know, should I do this? I was going to highlight two composers, and I just played one movement of composer Charles Wittenberg's 3 pieces for clarinet, but I think that maybe I will actually save that one because we don't have much time now, I think, and we should. What do you think? Should I play 2 pieces or 1 piece?
Which is which?
Because I was thinking that I wanted to actually talk about Meyer Kupferman also.
That's gonna be next week.
Which, no, well, it's already been 2 weeks since. Yeah.
So then do the Kupferman.
Should I do one or both? Yeah? Okay. I've got
2. Somebody said 2.
do 2?
Somebody commented 2.
Okay, maybe I'll do 2. Okay, it's not so long for that. Because it's 1:20, right? So we do, it's okay. So anyway, sorry, 1 second. Oh, but I actually have this here, everything. So this always happens to me because I feel pressed for time and then I lose my track of thought. That's yeah. So first I just speak of Charles Wittenberg, who is virtually unknown now, but for the clarinet, he is someone who was actually important. I mean, when I was a student, and somehow in this pandemic time also, I think we all tend to travel back in time in a certain way, thinking about maybe better times, whatever. Anyway, his dates were 1927 to 1984. He did not live a tremendously long time. He was graduated from Eastman in 48, and he was very involved in both electronic music, in serial music, and he was very involved in Bennington College, which has both a kind of very famous composer seminar and also kind of seminar for amateur musicians. And it's people of my generation all played his music. And there are two works for solo clarinet. Which, we're going to play the earlier one, which he wrote in 1963. And it goes 3 pieces for clarinet. And then he has 5 feuilletons later, which he wrote for the wonderful clarinetist Michael Sussman, who was a good friend of mine, of course, and we played for many years in the Orpheus Chamber Orchestra together. And I think perhaps at a later date I will play those other pieces, the feuilleton of his as well. Let me get myself together because this is not something I particularly know. I'll put this here. Here. Okay. So, these are the 3 pieces of Charles Wittenberg. And why am I playing these 2? This is something I will talk about more systematically probably next week, although I may end up with a kind of little bit of a diversion, go back to period instruments, but everything is always related in any case. But there's great kind of symbiotic relationship between, of course, classical music and folk music, and classical music especially, and the music of jazz, right? And classical musicians have taken different kinds of elements from jazz and used them in various ways, which sometimes are kind of jazz or swing related and often are completely different, but anyway come from that some kind of source. So Wittenberg was one who did take the elements of jazz, influence of jazz, and interpreted them in a way which was very different from jazz itself. But the rhythms of jazz are present in his music, but have been refined in a way so they actually don't sound, let's say, jazzy or swing, whatever. Okay, so these are the 3 pieces of Charles Wittenberg, and they're labeled 1, 2, and 3. can't see anymore. So this is 2. Number 3. That was 3 pieces by Charles Wittenberg, 1963. Okay. Do I have time? Oh, I do have time. Okay. So, I don't know why I do this to myself. Now the next composer is Meyer Kupferman. Meyer Kupferman is someone who was very prolific. He wrote tremendous amount of music, and quite well known during his life, but now is virtually unplayed and virtually forgotten, I would say, except probably for a few clarinet players who do play his music still. And he is very important for the clarinet. First of all, he was a fine clarinetist, and he was actually, in his own way, a brilliant jazz clarinetist. In his lifetime, he was called the 12-tone Benny Goodman, because he would write his serial compositions, but not only that, he wrote in so many different styles, but with very jazzy feel, not sort of refined or taken sort of certain elements and put in different contexts like Wittenberg, but sort of put in together sort of classical and jazz. And personally, I actually think that he's so-called third stream music, or that sort of jazz-inspired classical music, was perhaps the most interesting of all the composers I know. And that includes, in fact, even Gunther Schuller, who came up with the term third stream. And Gunther Schuller was a wonderful French horn player, a brilliant musician, and good friend of my father, I say. They played together quite often, and someone I knew very well as well. And Gunther Schuller was also a proselytizer, and he came up with the term third stream and very much popularized it. But Kupferman, I think, was someone who was able to synthesize a kind of classical jazz combination which sounded completely natural and not like so much of the classically so-called jazz-inspired pieces were that somehow kind of stilted or if they sound not nearly as good as what the original would have been. Okay, so this is a piece. This is his most overtly jazz piece, or well, I'd say one of them. He wrote several, but for the clarinet. It's called Moonflower's Baby, which he wrote in 1983, and I premiered in 1985. And I even took on tour, and I premiered in what was the Soviet Union, now Russia, in 1987. No, 1988 actually. Yeah. And I just so happened to have a poster which in the good old days when I taught at the Eastman School, my students actually were so nice to actually frame for me. And it's all in Russian, but let me see, which one? 1, 2, 3, 4. 5 down, you find the Russian premiere of this piece. Can you see it? It's the fifth. It's in Russian, Lunные цветы, which means moon flowers. They didn't put baby. Okay. I thought this is kind of cute. And it's nice. I should mention that I also premiered Wittenberg's piece in Moscow as well. Earlier, much earlier than Lunicity this was. Okay. Now I did play this, and I don't. Hopefully, I can play it now. So this is Лунные цветы, or Moonflower's Baby. Oops. Excuse me. Thank you all. Take care.